For the first time ever, there has been an official acknowledgement and a revelation of what a Kashmir agreement could look like between India and Pakistan. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Our focus today takes you inside the back channel between India and Pakistan, a draft negotiated Kashmir agreement that was hammered out during the Manmohan Singh years but reviewed by the Modi government. This revelation has come in veteran diplomat Satinder Lambah's new book that looks at the pursuit of peace under 6 different prime ministers. In fact, the book reveals that the Modi government also sent quote unquote an emissary in 2017 to meet with Nawaz Sharif, who was then at the helm of affairs in Pakistan. The spotlight on steel magnate Sajjan Jindal has been revived. Mr. Jindal is, of course, the emissary, though he's not named in the book, but you can join the dots in other ways. The details of the draft agreement are also fascinating. We'll have more of those details in this program as we look at the revelations in this new book, In Pursuit of Peace, that is in fact being published posthumously. Satinder Lambah was the envoy for back channel talks for nearly a decade, and he met with Prime Minister Modi twice, as has been revealed in this book. In fact, the Modi government reached out to him to also consider meeting Nawaz Sharif on the government's behalf, but by then the leading businessman, as he's called in the book, Sajjan Jindal, had already reached Lahore on his personal plane to meet with Nawaz Sharif. So taking you inside the back channel track today with a distinguished panel of experts, let's meet our guests now, if we can bring them up. Ambassador Raghavan, who's of course been High Commissioner to Pakistan, is with us. Welcome to the program, sir. Aisha Siddiqa, one of Pakistan's foremost strategic affairs columnists and commentators, is with us. Good to see you, Dr. Aisha Siddiqa. Dr. Sanjay Baru is with us. Sanjay Baru is, of course, media advisor to Manmohan Singh in the first term of the UPA government. And this is a process that began in the age of Musharraf and went right through General Kayani's tenure in Pakistan. And also joining us is veteran diplomat Ambassador Sharad Sabharwal, who's of course also been High Commissioner for India to Pakistan. So I don't think we can get a better set of experts to talk about what Ambassador Satinder Lambah has chronicled in his book. Let me actually start, before I come to the diplomats, to Sanjay Baru. I start with you because obviously Manmohan Singh was keen perhaps on reaching some sort of negotiated draft settlement. There were 14 points that formed the core of this negotiation. And while there's been a lot of speculation on the so-called 4-point formula of Pervez Musharraf, Ambassador Lambah's book makes it clear this was not Musharraf's 4-point formula. This was a 14-point draft agreement that both sides had virtually agreed to. And we'll be sharing those details. Some of it are known. The LOC is the de facto border, no joint sovereignty, easy movement across the LOC, an end to terrorism and violence by Pakistan. And if all of this happened, then perhaps eventually looking at a scenario where military formations, particularly in urban areas, could be pulled back. But that was very sort of down the road in the future. Dr. Baru, the genesis of this draft negotiation and the fact that the Modi government reviewed it, let's also remember Satinder Lambah's book has been praised and blurbed by the present NSA, Ajit Doval. He's pretty much endorsing, in that sense, the findings of this book is authentic. Sanjay Baru, over to you.
Thank you, Barkha. Let me put the timeline to what happened as far as I know it. There are distinguished diplomats here who may certainly know more than me. First and foremost, what Mr. Lambah has written in this book, and I pay tribute to Satinder Lambah, who is a very distinguished diplomat, has been hinted at both in my own book, The Accidental Prime Minister, in which I listed out some of the elements of this formula, and equally in the book of Mr. Khurshid Kasuri, the former, I think he was foreign minister and NSA of Pakistan. So, some of this has been written, never denied, never accepted. And I must say, I never spoke to Mr. Lambah when I was writing my own book. I pieced what I wrote based on, like a good journalist, whatever I was hearing. The critical document, if you like, with which a lot of us were working was the Amritsar speech of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. I don't know if you will recall, that was the day I was told by the Prime Minister alert the media, I'm speaking in Punjabi in Amritsar, but get an English translation and circulate it. And so it was one speech where he spoke in Punjabi, but we had an English translation ready and immediately gave it to the entire media. And that was the text, which in a sense has all the elements. To the best of my recollection, this process began, maybe it was there, began under Prime Minister Vajpayee, I'm not aware of that, but it certainly began when both Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Musharraf met in New York in September 2004. And it was Mani Dixit, who was then the National Security Advisor, who sat in the room and subsequently was asked to leave the room. Only the two principals were in the room. As I mentioned in my book, Natwar Singh was kept out. So the two principals met there in September. And what we were given to understand is that essentially the ideas came from Dr. Singh, but he said, or either he said to Musharraf or Musharraf said to Singh, that let it be seen as something that is coming from Pakistan. So they came to be called the kind of Musharraf's proposals, but actually they were Musharraf Manmohan Singh proposals. And when I wrote this in my book, and as I said, I didn't speak to anyone, I wrote it purely based on my understanding of the relevance of the Amritsar speech. When I understood that speech, I knew what was the game. And then finally, also the fact that the Srinagar Muzaffarabad bus, you were there, I think, in Srinagar when we opened up the bus route. And if you see that speech of the Prime Minister and talk about a joint, authority. Incidentally, I don't see anywhere in whatever has been reported of Mr. Lambah, so the idea of some joint activity. There is no shared sovereignty, but my understanding was that they were going to do things like a joint tourism authority that would bring in tourists from around the world who could then go to both sides of the LOC. A sports authority that would conduct games, but those have not, I don't see them in Mr. Lambah's book. I don't know what happened to some of those ideas.
Yeah.
Finally, just one more point. Let me say, and I need to say it if you don't mind. When my book came out, with the singular exception of Mr. Lambah, a lot of people said it was all fact, a fiction, not fact. What I had written was denied. And therefore, I'm delighted. Mr. Lambah never opened his mouth. I traveled with him 2-3 times for India-Pakistan dialogues. We were in Bangkok together. We were in Dubai together with friends from both countries. And I would go on asking him what he thought of what I wrote. And he would smile and keep quiet, but he never denied. So anyway, I'm glad.
As you claim a small vindication, let me claim a very tiny one. As a reporter, I had first broken the story of Sajan Jindal, the steel industrialist, playing a role in the back channel talks, and both governments in India and Pakistan archly denied this. And as we now look upon that role being completely, if you just join the dots and the timing, completely authenticated in Mr. Lambah's book, I'm also going to claim a minor vindication. But then let's move on to the bigger picture. Let's bring in the diplomats and Dr. Siddiqa. Ambassador Sabharwal, let's get to what we know about the agreement. Dr. Baru is right. This business of joint sort of operational projects does not find a mention, at least in Satinder Lambah's book. I don't know if it was eventually thrown out. Both you and Ambassador Raghavan can tell us more. But if we bring up these points now that we know about the negotiated draft agreement, what is important is that the book says that this agreement was reviewed by the Modi government. Mr. Lambah had 2 different meetings with the Prime Minister, and he was told by PMO officials that there wasn't any major disagreement with this agreement. The no redrawing of boundaries, no joint sovereignty. I mean, you know the essence of it. Go ahead, Ambassador Sabharwal first, and then Ambassador Raghavan.
Barkha, first about what might have been there, in the agreement. I can tell you there is no authoritative version of the agreement in the public domain. And so therefore, the speech made by Mr. Lambah in Srinagar in May 2014 for a possible solution to the Kashmir issue is perhaps the closest we can come to understanding what might have been there. to my mind, there were four important elements in this understanding. The one was trade and travel across the line of control. People should be able to travel, conduct trade. Now that was, as you know, started. Bus service was started. Trade started initially for 2 days and then made for 4 days later on during my tenure. Second was thinning of troops, especially in residential areas as the security situation improved. Now, this was different from the so-called Musharraf formula. The comparison is always made with his 4 points and so on. Now, he had spoken of demilitarization, etc. This was thinning of troops, especially in residential areas, but subject to the security situation improving. So there was an onus on Pakistan. Third was self-governance for internal management in equal measure on both sides. And fourth, and this addresses a point which was made here earlier, some kind of joint tourism authority and so on. I don't think there was any, at least I am not aware of any such proposal having been discussed. But what was there was a joint consultative mechanism, and this is something which Dr. Manmohan Singh mentions in his Amritsar speech also. Joint consultative mechanism to discuss issues of socio-economic importance. Now, here again, it differs from Musharraf's 4-point formula, now, where he talks of a joint mechanism to oversee self-governance and issues going beyond self-governance. So that would have brought, Pakistan into many other things on the Indian side. But to my mind, what was agreed was a joint consultative mechanism to discuss issues of socio-economic nature, which would include education, health, tourism,
Right.
etc., issues of that kind. Last point which you made, now this is a revolution because we know that this is not a process which was confined to one government. We knew that. At least there were some kind of beginnings during the Vajpayee government. The agreement was fleshed out during the UPA government. But now it seems that the understandings remained on the table. At least till April 2017 from the Indian side, when the author, Mr. Lambah, was asked to go to Pakistan to meet Nawaz Sharif. Of course, as we know from the book, the visit didn't take place, and that's the last he heard of it. He also says that he briefed the Prime Minister, and he was given to understand, probably at official level, I'm sure at official level, that no major change was required. That, of course, has now changed after August 5, 2019 move, and we can come to that if you wish later on.
Yeah, so I think that's the perfect cue to bring in Ambassador Raghavan, because in the chapter where Satinder Lambah talks about meeting the Prime Minister, at one of those meetings, Ambassador Raghavan, he mentions that you were there outside, and so you were still in service then, in active service, and this is the time when the Modi government wants Sati Lambah to go on its behalf to meet with Nawaz Sharif. But parallel to that, he doesn't name Sajjan Jindal, he says a leading businessman, went on his personal plane instead. And so I informed the Prime Minister's office that it would not be correct for two people to be representing me. So basically what's very interesting is by this time the attack on the Pathankot air station has happened. By this time we know that the Kulbhushan Jadhav controversy is grabbing the headlines. And yet the Prime Minister, Modi, is keen on restarting the back channel. Again, I mentioned not just were you there, as mentioned by Sati Lambah, but that the NSA, Ajit Doval, currently, at the helm of strategic affairs, has blurbed this as an authentic account of everything that went down. So tell us more, Ambassador Raghavan.
Well, I think the important point to remember, and often that point, because it's so obvious, is overlooked or understated. The important point to remember is how important, how significant is the overall framework of India-Pakistan relations when you're discussing Jammu and Kashmir. Because all of what happened, and which has been detailed by Mr. Lambah in his book, and what had happened earlier, was really contingent on the overall framework of India-Pakistan relations and the upward trajectory it witnessed late 2003, 2004 onwards. Whatever was discussed in the back channel really was a subset of that larger improvement. And without that larger improvement, nothing was going to be possible. It was not a technical discussion at all, because in the end, if you look at it in structural terms, what was being done across the LOC was basically replicating what had already happened across the international border in terms of visa relaxations and greater impetus to trade, the Joint Commission, the composite dialogue going on various issues. So I think keeping J&K as a subset of the larger India-Pakistan framework is very important, and it's something which we often lose sight of. The second point is, which you asked about Mr. Lambah and meeting the Prime Minister. I think we shouldn't forget that in 2014, when the new government was sworn in, the general impression, not just outside the government, but also within the government, was that you have a very strong government in India, and it is determined to take forward the process and to take it forward at a speed which would be far in excess of what had been achieved earlier. And that really underwrote, that was the subtext of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif coming here for the swearing in and so on, the numerous other attempts which were made. The attempts did not succeed, and it remains counterfactual that suppose after Pathankot, if events had played out differently, what course India-Pakistan relations would have taken. But that's a counterfactual. We don't know. It's a what if to which there is no answer.
But we do know, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but we do know that per Mr. Lambah, Ambassador Lambah, the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office were on board in essence with the draft negotiation that had been finalized, almost finalized, nearly finalized in the Manmohan Singh years.
I don't think we can have much doubt about that, because certainly when Prime Minister Modi visited Lahore in 2014, the spirit very much was that I am putting my personal political capital behind the India-Pakistan relationship, and I'm going to take it forward at a pace which nobody has anticipated. So I don't think we should have any serious doubt that there was any rethinking about what had been achieved in the past. Instead, I would feel that the view was that we can do much more and much more quickly. But as I said, the central issue was of the overall texture of the India-Pakistan relationship. It was not so much a Kashmir question, but a larger India-Pakistan question. And I think that is where the picture got blurry after 2017, because that central dynamic changed very fundamentally.
That's right. And today you almost have a kind of frozen moment, as it were, between India and Pakistan. Dr. Siddiqa, the view, as it were, from Pakistan, other than Khurshid Kasuri's account, and it is not so detailed, Ambassador Lambah actually says in his book that there have been many near agreements, but this was the closest he believes that both countries got to signing on the dotted line, as it were. And he even argues that the Modi government was willing to continue with that essence. In Pakistan, this has never been officially acknowledged. In India, also at a governmental level, it hasn't. But this is the man who was actually leading the back channel talks, and he names 3 Pakistani interlocutors that he interacted with, 2 different army chiefs, ending with suggesting that General Kiani was very much on board. Your perspective?
Well, Barkha, firstly, let me start that before I answer your question, is that I'm so glad that this book has come out. And now that at this point in time, India-Pakistan peace is not fashionable for somebody to talk about it. It makes us think that, probably we should start talking about India-Pakistan peace again and pick it up. See, what had happened is that, yes, it's not, Niaze Naik, Ambassador Niaze Naik would probably through all these years also been part of back channel. He has never written about it. Khurshid Kasuri is the only one who's written about it. But I think the perspective that I see is that 2017, and we come to 2017, and a lot, I mean, I've discussed it with many people who were involved with it. I think the problem there was that 2017 things didn't pick up, mainly because relationship between Nawaz Sharif, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, and his army chief then had started to kind of freeze. The problem was that especially with the visit with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Lahore, the problem that had begun to occur in Pakistan Army and Pakistan's Prime Minister's relationship is that they thought the Pakistani Prime Minister was keeping the military out of the whole debate. And they'd always insisted, I mean, though Kiani was very eager on India-Pakistan trade, he was not eager on Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif keeping the army out. And so with Mr. Jindal coming to Lahore to meet Nawaz Sharif, although it happened, it completely strengthened the feeling that this is something, an initiative that the Prime Minister was going to do on his own, and therefore the military kicked in. So this was essentially 2017. Everything stopped there because in 2017 there was an essential breakdown of relations between Pakistan Army and and Pakistan's Prime Minister.
But before that breakdown, would you say before that breakdown, because Satinder Lambah's book does suggest that the Pakistan army was on board. Do you think? I know it's a counterfactual, as Ambassador Raghavan says it, like so many other things. But if that relationship had not broken, things could have gone in a different direction.
Yes, it could have, because the army was definitely on board. I mean, they were. I mean, I had a chance to speak to the Pakistani side of the team, because there was Ikrier from India and Lums from Lahore University of Management Sciences, which as a team, along with funding from the UK government, was actually facilitating a lot of dialogue between industrialists, between businessmen, and diplomats as well. Now, they say that the army was facilitating. They were facilitating visas, they were helping with the dialogue. All they insisted on was to be kept in the loop. And what Nawaz Sharif tried to do there was actually take the army out of the loop and said, I can probably do it on my own. It should be my initiative, peace. And I think part of the problem with India-Pakistan peace dialogue is that every government thinks that they need to be making history. And that is what Nawaz Sharif tried to do, and that's where a major mistake was made.
Yeah. The moment you stop being incremental and you look for the drama, you trip, basically. Ambassador Sabharwal, go ahead. Sharat Sabharwal, go ahead.
That army was in favor. Yes, Mr. Lambah says that, and that indeed was, as he said, the impression that what he was told when he met Musharraf also. So the army under Musharraf, as the president and the army chief, was certainly in favor. I don't know what happened during Rahil Sharif's time. By that time, I had left. But I can tell you that Kiani, when he became the army chief, initially he accepted the appointment of an interlocutor, etc., probably under American pressure, or he was well disposed towards the process. But later on, he changed his mind. So that in 2011, I am told by a senior military interlocutor that they haven't seen the papers on the back channel. That was just not true, because Kiani, as DG ISI, we know, had remained involved in consultations on the Pakistani side during the Musharraf years. And then as Mr. Lambah mentions in his book, he is told by Tariq Aziz, the Pakistani interlocutor, first one with him, that he sent all the papers when the government changed to the Foreign Office and to the army. So at least Ashfaq Parvez Kiani was not favorably disposed as he moved towards the end of his tenure. I think that needs to be made clear.
Interesting. And the other thing
that's something which Mr. Lambah mentions in the book also, that he changed his mind later.
Correct. But Ambassador Raghavan, and then I'll come to Sanjay, he also says that just as this draft is getting kind of near completion, Shahryar Khan, who's by now his Pakistani interlocutor, calls him and says, one more change, one more change. And Ambassador Lambah has to say, I'm no longer the person you can call because the government in India is changing. It'll now be a new dispensation. What do you think changed between 2017 when the Modi government was on board with this? We don't know what the Pakistan military would have eventually done, and now when the Modi government would not be, I imagine, we don't know, on board with this. Of course, Pulwama happened.
I think what
Uri
changed
happened.
was the overall
Yes.
framework of India-Pakistan relations. And essentially, after the Pathankot terrorist attack, and one should remember that things did not go south immediately after the Pathankot terrorist attack because Prime Minister Modi kept trying. And something which had never been conceded in the past, which had always been a main object of Pakistan after any major terrorist attack, that we should also be involved in the inquiry. A Pakistani inquiry team went to Pathankot. It was something no other government had agreed to, but it was agreed by the government here. But once it became clear that actually nothing was moving, I think then the Prime Minister lost interest and the system took over. And if you read Mr. Lambah's book, you will see that he greatly emphasizes in the India-Pakistan context the role of the Prime Minister and the role of the political leadership. Because on both sides, unless the process is driven from the top, the system which is conservative, which is status quoist, and which does not want any change, will weigh in and will usually prevail. So I think once it became clear that the situation in Pakistan was no longer meaningful in terms of permitting progress on India-Pakistan relations, I think then things just started going down. If I may also say that, this question of whether the army was on board or not, we'll never fully know the answer because there is never a clear answer. Some people will think in one direction, others will think in the other direction. Usually a great deal depends on what view the Chief of Army Staff has. But more than that, essentially it's a question of what is the civil-military play. And I think what often is the central issue is not so much India or India-Pakistan relations, but the absence of trust between the civilian leadership and the military leadership. And then India-Pakistan becomes a kind of a victim to that dynamic rather than being an independent factor.
I think that's absolutely correct. Aisha, I know you want to come in. Let me get Dr. Baru and then I'll come to you right after that. Dr. Baru, what's interesting is also domestic politics, right? The BJP has a kind of strident politics on Pakistan, but actually the Prime Minister, through several initiatives, he actually did not go by the book, whether it was landing up unannounced. It looked unannounced. I'm sure Sajjan Jindal had done the spade work, officials had done the spade work, but to create that impression of a spontaneous sort of happy birthday to Nawaz Sharif, to call the SARC leaders for his swearing in, to allow, as was just mentioned, a Pakistani team into an Air Force base, to give them that access, these were all high risk attempts at peace, much in the mold of Vajpayee, much in the mold of Manmohan Singh. I find that continuity between three very different prime ministers quite interesting. I just wanted your comment on that, Sanjay Baru.
Well, I'm glad you brought politics into this discussion because that is of the essence. The fact is, and I've said this in my book, Manmohan Singh did not have the political clout in his second term to proceed on this formula. The formula was dead in September 2008. Remind me from memory, I'm saying when Benazir Bhutto was assassinated, whenever that was, and then President Musharraf got into problems with the judiciary, there was no question of going forward. When Dr. Manmohan Singh came back to power in 2009, as I've again written in my book, I told him, sir, you do not start this process again. But he went and started it. And
Why did you say that? Why did you say that to him?
because I mean, there's no time to get into the details. Look what happened in 2009. He was not even being given credit for that victory. The whole party was saying they came back to power because of Rahul Gandhi. And then he wanted to initiate again this dialogue with Pakistan. I told him, sir, you won't be allowed to do this. Don't waste your time. He went to Sharm el Sheikh, came back with egg on his face. The party abandoned him on Sharm el Sheikh, whatever that agreement was. So I think there are two different things. There is peace, trade, dialogue, movement of people, etc., the kind of peace that we've had sporadically from time to time over the last 75 years. And there is this solution to the Kashmir problem. I'm not convinced that Narendra Modi was on board as far as the Manmohan Singh Musharraf formula as a solution to the Kashmir formula is concerned. I'm not convinced. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done what they've done, Article 370, etc. So, that's a different issue. Peace, of course, everybody wants peace. And even Modi would want peace. He tried whatever he tried, it didn't work, and then all kinds of things happened. But I think it's important to recognize that what Manmohan Singh tried to do, he did at a time when he thought Musharraf was in command, having been from the army chief, staged a coup, he was in control in Pakistan, and he felt he was in a position that he could deliver on the Indian side.
Right.
Both those assumptions ended by the end of 2008, and then you had Bombay attacks, etc. And therefore, I don't think, I don't know. I'm sorry, I've not read Mr. Lambah's book, but if he's giving the impression that the formula was still alive and kicking in the second term, I'm afraid the politics in this country would not have allowed it, even if ideas were there.
So let me just say to our audience that hasn't read the book, yes, indeed, he is saying that. He's saying he was given to understand from officials in the Prime Minister's office that there's an actual file. The file of this 14-point negotiation was reviewed at the highest levels of government. There was no disagreement with it, that Satinder Lambah was being sought out to go and meet with Nawaz Sharif. There was a keenness to kickstart the process again, despite Pathankot, despite Prabhushan Jadhav. I will bring in Aisha and then give the last word to both the diplomats, because yes, Dr. Baru does raise the interesting point that if that was the case, then why 370? But as we know from politics in both our countries, politics is not static. Imran Khan was a poster boy for the military. Today he's taking on a section of the military. Our politics is not static. It changes. Aisha, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a small point I want to make. One was that just a reminder, in the last days of Musharraf, and especially when he was negotiating with the other side, what he constantly kept saying that we were short on time, that it has to be done as quickly as possible. So probably he had a premonition, call it a sense of that unless he delivered quickly, his generals will start to breathe down his neck. And that is exactly what also happened with Kiani. I mean, that's where internal politics kicks in. It kicks in on both sides. But I can only explain from the Pakistani side. What was happening was that Kiani, despite talking to people, talking and seeming keen on India-Pakistan trade, what happened was that when it actually came the time to deliver, he was caught at a moment of his career when he had become very unpopular because of the extension he got from the civilian government. Now the same thing has begun to happen in a way now. That and I think one needs to be very conscious. I mean, something which Ambassador Raghavan also raised, that the background music becomes very important in India-Pakistan relations, and that background music is politics behind it. The larger politics of India-Pakistan, but also politics within these countries. I mean, recently, the new army chief has gone to the LOC. Now, what is he trying to do? He's not trying to kind of excite people and take up the level of animosity. But I think what's important, what it indicates, is that politically, in order for peace to restart, it cannot restart if the government or the man in charge is weak on his knees, and that's what's happening.
Yes, that's a good point, but it doesn't actually apply to the Indian context where the man in charge is not weak on his knees. He's one of the strongest politically, sort of most in command leaders we've had in recent times. And Dr. Baru juxtaposes that with Manmohan Singh's second term, where he says he didn't have that political clout. I just want to be a little forward thinking in our last comments from the diplomats. Ambassador Sabharwal, Dr. Baru not convinced that the Modi government was on board with this formula. We have Ambassador Lambah's word for it, and now we'll never know. Because do you think this formula can ever be picked up again, or do you think it's kind of gone into sort of the annals of history?
It's difficult to say what might happen, but Mr. Lambah has said in his book, and I agree with him, that it's a template which, despite lapse of time, remains available, which can be picked up with or without modification to take the process forward. I think let's not forget, that this is a discussion and a formula which took the focus away from territory. Real solutions are always focused on territory and so on, or joint sovereignty, or division on communal lines, etc., etc. It took the focus away from that, from UN Security Council resolutions. All of that was left behind, and it took the process towards the well-being of people and economic integration in that part of the two countries. Now, that I think has to be kept in mind, whatever happens in future. The only problem, of course, will be the terms of engagement that have been changed by the August 5, 2019 move. At least one element in this agreement, which is self-governance for internal management, if implemented, would require going back on that change of some sort. And I don't know if that would be possible, because that change has been very popular in the rest of India. So I think we need to keep that in mind. Subject to that, I believe it remains a template which can.
So let me give Ambassador Raghavan the last word. In a post-abrogated sort of abrogation of 370 India, does this template have value? Can it have value?
Well, I think the template does have value, and certainly elements of the template will remain relevant in different frameworks. I don't think that the constitutional changes or legislative changes of August 2019 have such a big impact. Because the Pakistanis made such a big stir about it, we think that this is a fundamental change. It is not. The Pakistanis never recognized the state of Jammu and Kashmir. They always said that Article 370 is not worth the paper it is written on. So your internal legislative and constitutional positions, what we have on Jammu and Kashmir or what Pakistan has on POK, has in fact very little impact on the India-Pakistan relationship. What is important is the texture and quality of the relationship. And if that improves, if a new dynamic emerges, then certainly this template will have value.
Yeah, I think I just want to say in the end, one, how refreshing it's been to be able to talk about India and Pakistan with a degree of distance and detachment, something that doesn't happen often enough. And two, just to say that if ever there is, I don't want to use the word breakthrough, if ever there is forward movement, then we must tip our hat to diplomats like Ambassador Lambah, who spent a near 10 years of his life working on this in the shadows and has left us a slice of history to access and understand from. Thank you, Ambassadors Raghavan and Sabharwal, to Dr. Siddiqa, Dr. Baru. Thank you very much. And to our audience, pleasure as always to have you with us, and see you tomorrow at the same time.
We started Mojo right here in this basement. Just 4 people, 4. And now we're about to hit our first 1 million subscribers. So this is to say thank you to all of you for your support, for your respect, and for your encouragement. We've always gone to where the story is. During the pandemic, when television's big anchors were hunkered down in their studios or at their homes, we hit the road. We traveled from Delhi to Kerala, covering 30,000 kilometers in a small car, reporting from inside ICUs and inside slum tenements. Whether it's flash floods or war zones, we've always put our boots on the ground. In fact, we're just back from Punjab, tailing the Khalistani fugitive Amritpal Singh. And through all of this, we have always put you, the people, first. In an age of partisan polarized media where most journalists are either chamcha ya morcha, we believe the story is sacred and the truth of the story is what matters. And now as we get ready for the next step, we need your help. Become a Mojo member and get first access to all our big interviews. Get a chance to ask our newsmakers questions. Get a chance to write and report for us for both our website and our channels. And also, interact with me and my colleagues directly through AMA sessions. Literally, ask me anything. Click on the join now right next to the subscribe button, and yes, also subscribe if you haven't yet, and become a Mojo member for just 159 rupees a month. Hope to see lots of you in our community.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.